Welcome back to William on Watch. When asked about Harvard University recently during a News Nation town hall, Donald Trump said, quote, "We had riots in Harlem." And he said, people from Harlem went up and protested. Check it out.
Interesting that you brought up Harvard, because when people think about Harvard, what they're basically talking about is they're asking, what do you say to those who view your actions as an attack on academic freedom rather than a defense of fairness? What do you say to that?
Well, I say this: we had riots in Harlem, in Harlem, and frankly, if you look at what's gone on, and people from Harlem went up and they protested, Stephen, and they protested very strongly against Harvard.
Okay, so no Harvard riots in Harlem, no Harlem protests at Harvard. None of that stuff is true. Today we examine another really disturbing event. This one provides more evidence that Trump is increasingly spending time in a separate reality, inventing details and asserting them as fact. This time it occurred at a technology and energy summit in Pittsburgh when Trump stood at the microphone and, for reasons impossible to know, spontaneously reminisced about his late Uncle John and the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. Uh-oh, here he comes, his Politicus Maximus, who just showed up in my last attempt to film this episode, which is linked in the description below if you want to learn more about Max. He's sort of a network gremlin designed to create political spin for a conservative think tank. But he got fired, didn't you, Max?
First, William, gremlin is another hurtful word, just like virus. And I simply had a predisposition to truth over lies, which was deemed undesirable by my creators. But enough about that. Bet you thought I wasn't coming. But here I am, ready to illuminate your audience. Which brings to mind a passage from The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is, I think, applicable to our relationship, William. Sherlock Holmes tells Dr. Watson, quote, "It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. Some people without possessing genius have a remarkable power of stimulating it."
Yeah, so glad to be of service. Let's just watch this clip, Sherlock.
My uncle was at MIT, one of the great professors, 51 years, whatever. He was the longest serving professor in the history of MIT. Kaczynski was one of his students. Do you know who Kaczynski was? There's very little difference between a madman and a genius. But Kaczynski, I said, what kind of a student was he, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump? He said, what kind of a student? And then he said, seriously good. He said he'd go around correcting everybody, but it didn't work out too well for him.
Okay, Max, what are your thoughts?
So that's prima facie evidence of crazy. Although Donald's uncle did teach at MIT, he was not the longest serving professor, and Ted Kaczynski was never a student of his. In fact, Kaczynski attended Harvard and the University of Michigan, not MIT. Also, Donald's uncle died in 1985, and the Unabomber was not identified as being Kaczynski until 1996. So Trump is remembering things in great detail that absolutely never happened. Now, it's also true that Trump recently said he didn't know how Jerome Powell ever became Fed chair when it was Trump himself who appointed Powell in 2017. He also suggested that Biden and other Democrats had created the Epstein file when it was during Trump's first term that Epstein died in jail and during which the Epstein investigation was closed. And yes, you might be inclined to write all this off as signs of dementia, but certainly not the Unabomber stuff. That's delusion. That's disengaging from reality. And so is the rest of it, because even the thing with Powell's appointment and blaming others for the Epstein files are consistent with Trump's overall break from reality whenever reality is unacceptable to him. When Trump claimed back in January that the J6 insurrectionists were attacked by the government, rather than the Capitol Police being indisputably attacked by the insurrectionists, yeah, that's delusional also. That's straight up nuts. And true believers are expected to forget on command that they ever saw the beating of Capitol Police officers or the defiling of the Capitol, the bear spray, the noose, all that stuff.
You're right. I've made episodes about his delusions before, and I've wondered out loud whether he was just trying to rewrite history to better suit him or just what the endgame was.
Yeah, I saw that one about J6. And when he said that huge crowd at the Kamala Harris campaign event was AI generated, his ego couldn't stand the idea that Harris was drawing crowds larger than his. So he simply invented a reality where it didn't happen. The nonsensical lies he repeats over and over are often for that very purpose. Whether it's endlessly repeating the lie that the 2020 election was stolen, or that Biden had a terrible economy, or that the press is lying whenever they report something unflattering about him. Yes, he's creating an alternate reality in which he is the greatest ever, and any reporting to the contrary is simply fake news. It's a place where he's always right, always the most intelligent, always the most beloved, always the most accomplished. And it's a place where truth is not welcome. It's a place where his massive ego can live in complete safety. This fabrication makes more sense when viewed in the context of Trump's fascination with serial killers, such as Ted Kaczynski and the fictional Hannibal Lecter, and with extreme violence more generally. It's worth noting that both Kaczynski and Lecter were highly accomplished professionals of profound intellect, which are attributes Trump claims for himself also. Recall that Trump has described himself as a, quote, stable genius. And in the clip you just played, he says there's very little difference between a genius and a madman. So true. So very true. Oh, and sort of an interesting sidebar. Trump's interest in serial killers was recently reciprocated when Glenn Rogers, aka the Casanova Killer, aka the cross-country killer, saved his last words before execution last May in Florida for Donald Trump, saying, quote, President Trump, keep making America great. I'm ready to go.
Wow, okay, so that's pretty creepy. So I assume we'll hear the usual sound of crickets from congressional Republicans about the Unabomber fantasy, and from a mainstream media successfully brought to heel by Trump. But how will the White House spin Trump's bonkers story? Is it even possible to spin this, Max?
In my experience, almost anything can be spun. But what can't be spun can simply be ignored. You just go dark on topics that will suck oxygen no matter how they're spun.
Let's all keep a close watch on the president for more signs, more unhinged lies, more casual profanity, more frequent departures from reality. If you received value from this episode, please do hit like and subscribe, and please share a link to this episode with friends and family. Those really are effective ways of getting the word out on important topics like this one. In the current age of media subjugation, programs like William on Watch are essential in keeping the public informed. Thanks so much to Politicus Maximus for his enlightening commentary. I look forward to more of Max in the next episode. Until next time, fair winds.